As you start to explore what your sacral center feels like when you're feeling lit up and when you're not, you may discover that you have a hard time really hearing it, really feeling what it feels like, and really getting that response up and out of your mouth. So this section addresses how the sacral speaks to you, and if you're having trouble really connecting to it, what may be getting in the way of you really hearing or feeling your sacral response. So by way of review, I know we've talked about this time and again, your sacral response comes out of you in guttural sounds, in the sounds of uh-huh and uh-uh. Uh-huh meaning yes and uh-uh meaning no, or if you're a manifesting generator, it could be some other sound. And if you normally utter an uh-huh or an uh-uh or some sort of guttural sound, and that's not happening, then you're not having a sacral response, which means that you either bypass the sacral response with your thought process, or there's nothing for you to respond to, or you may not have the right thing in front of you, such as the right question. And as we get into the sacral sessions, you'll understand that you need to be asked the right questions in order to get clarity about your direction through your sacral response. And we've mentioned this before, manifesting generators, but it bears repeating so that you really can internalize it. Your sacral response may come out of your mouth in some other sound other than uh-huh and uh-uh. And it can be hard for you to know whether you're responding or initiating because your response is so fast and your energy moves so quickly through your body. So at first, as you're really getting in touch with your sacral response, you may not know whether it's your sacral or it's something else. And one thing that may help you is to understand how to know when you're not using your sacral response, how to know when your sacral is actually trying to tell you something and you're not hearing it or you're overriding it. So here are some clues that will clue you into that. If you're overriding or ignoring or not hearing your sacral response, you will hesitate, especially when someone is asking you a question, you'll hesitate before you respond. And you may hear words or thoughts in your head, because what happens when you hesitate is that you've bypassed the sacral response and then you're up in your head thinking about your response rather than listening to or following what your body initially had to tell you. And then you may respond in words or thoughts. And this happens a lot, especially when I'm doing sacral sessions with people who are new to that process. When I ask those questions that are designed to get their sacral moving, a lot of times, at least initially, they lead with a sentence or they lead with something other than uh-huh or uh-uh or a guttural gut response. So if you hear words or if you're saying words, you've bypassed your sacral response. Now you can also bypass your sacral response when nothing comes out of your mouth, like when you're really feeling for that gut response, but nothing seems to be coming out. It could be that you have sort of muted that spontaneous expression of your gut response. And if you don't feel a sensation in your lower abdomen, it could mean that you're just disconnected from your sacral. You're disconnected from your inner guidance system. And if you're feeling this, if you start to play around with this and you're feeling like I don't feel anything, I don't hear anything, I don't know what she's talking about, know that most sacral beings, when they begin to tap into this aspect of their guidance system, struggle with that because most of us have been trained out of paying attention to our bodies. So if you're in that boat and you're feeling that way, don't worry, don't panic. You're going to have the tools that you need to really get back into your body and back into that connection with your gut response. So there are two things that interfere with the sacral response. The first one is conditioning, and the second one is not being asked questions that give you clarity. So we're going to talk about conditioning in detail here. And I want to just encourage you to listen to and watch this next section with soft ears and with soft eyes, because the deconditioning process is a very long process that you started when you were first introduced to your human design chart. And I'm going to give you an overview of what conditioning means in the context of human design, and also an overview of how your conditioning will be revealed to you over time. And then when we get into sacral sessions, we'll talk more in detail about this second thing that interferes with your sacral response, not being asked the questions that give you clarity. And you'll get a better idea then of what kinds of questions will really help you to engage your sacral motor. But let's go on and really dive into conditioning, what it is and how that interferes with your sacral response. Conditioning is a human design term that refers to what we've taken in from others in our environment that isn't ours. All of those colored in places on your human design chart are places that you have a consistent relationship with. They are an indication of who you really are, of how you show up in the world on a consistent basis. And all of those colored in areas, those defined areas, are what you can count on about your experience in life and what you can count on about who you are. So when we talk about conditioning, we're talking about those influences that come into your life that distract you from the themes that you're here to live out, from the way that you consistently process energy and the way that you're designed to operate. And when we're being conditioned, we often develop behavioral patterns and attitudes that aren't a reflection of our truth, that aren't a reflection and an expression of the definition in our chart. And this is because we've internalized these energies that aren't ours. And when I said that this next section takes a long time to integrate, it takes about 7 years. And in human design, we call that the deconditioning process. During that 7 years, because it takes about 7 years for full cellular turnover in the body, we become more attuned to who we naturally are, because we're becoming aware of and letting go of those things, those influences from other people and our environment that aren't really a true reflection of us. So as you follow your strategy and authority, you're going to start to see where you've been taking in energy from other people in your environment and amplifying it and possibly even distorting it. And this initial observation of how you do that, or how that's happening in your particular energy field, is understood through your undefined centers, through all those energy centers that are white and not colored in. And ultimately, you're going to start to become wise about how the energy in those undefined centers can be used and worked with. It doesn't happen all at once, so just relax. And today we're just going to scratch the surface of the conditioning in your undefined centers so that you can have an overview of the multiple ways that you could be distracted or disconnected from your sacral response. So here's your sacral center, and all of you have it defined. It's what you can count on. It's what you know about yourself to be true. It's your consistent guidance system, step by step through the world. If you don't have your human design chart out, this may be a good time to go and get it and take a look at it as we go through these undefined centers, because you will have any number of these other energy centers undefined, not colored in. So to recap what I just said about conditioning in the open and undefined energy centers, energy is amplified and distorted in these centers. You take it in, you feel it very deeply, you maybe make assumptions about it, or like an amplifier Like when someone is at a concert and they're calibrating their amplifiers, sometimes you get that feedback and fuzzy sound and distortion. That's kind of what happens in these undefined centers, in these open centers. And because it's coming and going, because it comes from the environment around you and people and energies are constantly moving through your environment, your experience of the energies and the way you process them through these centers that are not defined can be very unreliable. And if you try to take action or get clarity with the information that you're receiving through these centers, you'll be distracted from really hearing and feeling your sacral response. So I'm going to briefly go through the distraction patterns of these undefined centers, and remember just to relax and sort of take it all in. You'll have this recording for the rest of your life if you want to keep it on your computer, so you can go back to it time and time again as behavior patterns and attitudes begin to reveal themselves to you over time. You're just getting this overview as a touchstone for your awareness as you move through your human design journey. So let's start at the top with the head center. If you have an undefined head center, you can get carried away with other people's ideas and you may think that they're your own. So you may want to take action from other people's ideas and inspiration, or you may expend a lot of your life force energy trying to answer their questions. Moving down to the next center, which is the ajna. This is your center for how you process information. If your ajna is undefined, you can be very mentally rigid in an attempt to feel certainty, because thoughts are coming, thoughts are going, and if you're feeling insecure because you're feeling unfocused, you may try to hold on to thoughts and beliefs long after they serve you. And those thoughts and beliefs may have a lot to do with that cultural mindset of just do it, just initiate it. Or it may have something to do with doing work or activities that really don't serve you, that really aren't good for you. The throat center is the gearbox of the entire human design body graph. So in the beginning we talked about what made you a generator or a manifesting generator, and we talked about how you have the sacral center defined, and if you're a generator, that sacral energy doesn't get up to your throat for expression and manifestation. And if you're a manifesting generator, the sacral or one of the other motorized centers do connect to the throat. So all roads in the human design body graph lead to the throat in one way or another. And even if you don't have motorized energy that moves up to the throat, so that you have the energy to express and manifest all on your own, other people are always bringing that to you, or the transits in the cosmos are bringing that energy to you in an inconsistent way, a relatively inconsistent way, but it points to this fact that we all kind of need each other as collaborative energy partners to manifest and create what we're creating in this physical reality that we live in. Now, if you don't have definition in your throat, you may try to get attention or recognition. It's always best, if you don't have a motorized throat or if you don't have a defined throat, to wait until you're recognized before you express something. And that's part of that waiting process as well, because if the timing isn't right or the energy isn't there, your sacral is either not going to respond, or you're going to have a negative response or an response through your sacral center. But this need to be recognized, because a lot of times if your throat center is not defined, you can feel invisible. And if it pushes you into taking actions just because you want that attention, or speaking louder because you want to be heard, then it's going to really distract you from your sacral response, from what's the right timing to say what you have to say or to take the next step on what you are here to do. The G center is this diamond that would be roughly in the center of your chest, and it's the center for love, identity, and direction. So when you're trying to get love or to stick to one direction, it can distract you from your sacral response. You will have a tendency to override your sacral response and perhaps hang out with people that aren't good for you to hang out with, or take a direction that's not really authentic for you because you want to get that love, or because you want to stick with something even when it's not something that is good for you. The will center hangs down here just a little bit below and to the right of the G center, and it's the center for willpower, ego, and value and worth. And if your will center is undefined, you may find that you'll have this tendency to want to try and prove your value and worth. And even if your sacral is going you may ignore it or override it because you want to do whatever it is that you feel like you need to do in order to prove that you're valuable and worthy. The spleen center over here on the left is the center for vitality, instinct, in the moment intuition, and survival. If you don't have a defined spleen center, there can be this real physical sense of insecurity around survival. And when you're around people who have a defined spleen center, you may hold on to them even if they're not healthy for you. Even if you're in a relationship that's maybe abusive, you may hold on to that person because on some level they make you feel secure. Just imagine how much that depletes your sacral life force energy when you're grasping onto old situations and old relationships that don't really serve you anymore, and you're grasping because you want to feel that security. To take this to an extreme, let's look at the example of an abusive relationship. Someone who's in an abusive relationship will do anything to stay in that relationship. And if they have a defined sacral center, if they're a sacral being, their sacral has probably said but they've overridden it because they're holding on to that person, because they're holding on to that energy that makes them feel like they're secure, that makes them feel like maybe if they left they wouldn't have any place else to go, or what are they going to do if they leave. That's an extreme, and it's not necessarily a direct dynamic of an undefined spleen center, but it is an illustration of how conditioning in the undefined spleen can really throw you off balance and drain your sacral energy, drain your life force energy, and cut you off from your sacral response. Now the solar plexus, which is over on the right side, over to the right of the sacral center, it's also known as the emotional solar plexus, is the center for emotional awareness. And if you have an undefined emotional solar plexus, you'll have a tendency to avoid confrontation and truth. There's a very mechanical reason for this. You're taking in the emotional energy of others. You're feeling it very strongly. And when you're experiencing emotions, it creates a chemical reaction in your body, which can be very uncomfortable for someone who has an open emotional solar plexus. So when you are confronting a truth that isn't a pleasant truth, the other person who may have a defined emotional solar plexus will have emotions about it, will have negative emotions about it, and you will feel those emotions and have these chemical reactions in your body that really throws you off balance. And this happens when you're reacting to it and not aware of it necessarily, and you're holding on to those emotions because you think you need to do something about them. So that's why if you have an undefined emotional solar plexus, you may do whatever it takes and override your sacral response so that you don't have to feel those emotions. And that also means you will avoid truth and confrontation with people, or you will do things so that they won't get upset. The root center is here at the bottom of the body graph, and it is the center for adrenalized stress and pressure. When you have an undefined root center, you will feel extra stress and pressure to get free of the stress and pressure. And you will amplify other people's stress and be compelled to do something, even when your sacral is saying, to do that one more thing, to take care of this thing that's somebody else's emergency, because you want to just get free of the stress and the pressure. And the truth is, it's not yours. So here's the bottom line with all of these undefined centers. It boils down to this. If you're overriding your sacral response, it's probably because you're operating from a reaction to what someone else thinks, someone else wants, or someone else needs or finds valuable. None of it has anything to do with you. So we have this saying in human design about how to deal with the conditioning in these undefined centers. Be a screen and not a sponge. When the awareness comes up and you recognize that you're operating off of or reacting to the energy that you're taking in from others in your environment through one of these centers, that's an opportunity for you to practice letting go, being that screen, recognizing that you don't have to do anything about that energy and just let it flow through you. Because it all has to do with what someone else thinks or wants or needs or finds valuable. And the only way that you're going to discover what you want, need, or find valuable is when you tap into your sacral motor, when you really forge that reconnection or that connection with your sacral motor. So don't let any of these undefined centers distract you from that.